Now, let's look at how the rational approach perpetuates the problem. We shall again be paraphrasing the works of Seth in The Magical Approach by Jane Roberts. The intellect is brilliant, but on its own, it is isolated both in time and in space in a way that other portions of the self are not isolated. When the intellect is overly stressed, it can indeed become frightened, paranoid, because it cannot really perceive events until they have already occurred. It does not know what will happen tomorrow, and since it is overly stressed, its paranoid tendencies can only fear the worst. Now, those tendencies are not natural to the intellect, but only appear when it is forced to operate in such an isolated fashion under artificial time, isolated not only in time and space, but psychologically isolated from other portions of the self that are meant to bring it additional information that it does not possess, and to give it a kind of magical support. Your intellect needs to realize that it does not have to deal with life all alone, that it is supported and aided by other portions of the self. The greatest freedom comes from the realization that you are not your intellect. Your intellect is only a small but powerful tool in your vast toolbox. In your toolbox, you have many more tools, and all these tools were designed to work together. It is only our culture that has made these tools taboo and alienated them. For example, the church set up religious laws against certain psychological and mystical experiences. It did so not because it did not consider them realities, of course, but precisely because it recognized too well the disruptive influence that those experiences could have upon a world order that was based upon a uniform dogma. It was in fact because the church so believed in the great range of psychological, physical, and spiritual activity possible to human beings, to mankind, that it was so dogmatic and tireless in trying to maintain order. Witches, in quotes, witches, for example, were not considered insane or deranged by the church. The church could not at the time claim they were insane. They were instead considered evil. In this way, we were initially made to fear our own expanded nature, and eventually we even forgot it, and now we make fun of it as if it were insane. It is now time to revive that expanded nature and take back our birthright. The rational approach, built upon this artificially isolated framework, insists that the best way to solve a problem is to concentrate upon it, to project its effects into the future, to ruminate upon its consequences. In quotes, to stare at the bare facts head on. In other words, to attack the problem. This brings about an atmosphere in which the problem is compounded. The intellect on its own, so it seems, must deal not only with the problem today, but with its effects in the projected, disastrous, imagined tomorrows. This well-intentioned concentration, this determination to solve the problem, this rational approach then causes an even deeper sense of inadequacy. The concentration upon the problem brings about a kind of mechanical repetition, a repeated type of hypnotic focus. And this focus, through the law of attraction, perpetuates the problem. As Einstein said, a problem cannot be solved at the same level of consciousness that created it. Your experience will follow your concentration and belief and expectation. The mind is a great discriminator. It can use its reasoning to bring about almost any possible experience within your framework. Now, if this concentration on the problem is continued, it begins to organize its perceptions and experience along the same lines. It collects evidence, then, to prove its point, because the rational mind must have an acceptable reason for everything. Any improvement on the problem, unless it fits the rational model, is almost always overlooked, ignored. not considered as much hard evidence. Meanwhile, any difficulties definitely are considered hard evidence because they fit into the overall data collecting intellect as stated earlier. In other words, they prove the problem. In the meantime, of course, natural time is working in the background, creating the solution, powerful and valid solutions. Yet, because these solutions and their evidence do not fit into the rational picture, the picture of the rational mind that the rational mind has narrowly focused on, they gradually become discarded, ignored, thrown away. The solutions and their evidence are there, but they are not used, not even recognized. And so, as you can see, the rational or artificial approach is more often than not a very poor method of solving problems. And if anything, it causes far more problems than it ever solves. Furthermore, man makes many decisions that may seem quite wrong to the intellect because of its belief systems and because it is so cut off from other sources of information. The intellect, owing to our current belief system in the artificial approach, terms these decisions as, in quotes, mistakes and failures. However, in reality, a large number of those so-called mistaken decisions or failures or poor moves often represent self-corrective actions, decisions taken on knowledge not consciously perceived by the subconscious in natural time, and eventually they prove to have been the best decision possible. But this escapes your conscious mind. Some private life decisions or events may appear disadvantageous to the intellect for the same reasons, while instead they are also self-corrective measures that you are not able to perceive because of your beliefs. The rational approach, as it is now used, carries a basic assumption that anything that is wrong will get worse. That belief, of course, is highly detrimental because it runs against the basic principles of life. Were this the case in your terms of history, the world would never have lasted a century. It is interesting to note that even before medical science, there were a good number of healthy populations. No disease rubbed out the entire species. When you believe that the worst will happen, you must always be on guard. When you follow that so-called rational approach, however, you are bound to feel threatened, divorced from your body. Your thoughts and your body seem separate. Divisions seem to occur between the mental and the physical, where again each are supported by those magical processes. That rational approach, the artificial approach, goes against what we can only call life's directives and life's natural rhythms. It is contradictory to biological and psychic integrity, and again, it does not make sense. Just look at the world and the insane pressures it is under, and this will prove to you that this is so.